Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. See, whilst we are gathered here today to discuss the topic which you see in front of you, the headline news in all the newspapers in the last few days has been more about violence against doctors, and the protests have been held right through the country. And basically because this problem has been repeating itself, this time round the doctors are very serious that we have to find a solution. We at Medium stand in solidarity with the medical fraternity in this protest. Today is in fact National Protest Day by doctors as well as the entire healthcare industry. In fact, just 5 kilometers from here on the other side of Hussain Sagar, some of the most senior doctors and professionals have gathered to protest about atrocities on doctors. I had to set this record straight before we proceed, and also to say that we stand in solidarity with all the protests that are going. Violence has no place in society. Now, coming to today's topic, given the nature of the subject, which is so provocative, it may mean different things to different people. It is only fair that we share with you what we had in mind when we conceptualized the subject. Has medicine lost its soul? But even before I come to the point of what we had in mind, let me speak about what is it which we didn't have in mind. The first thing which I'm talking about is clinical competence. As a collective body, as healthcare industry, in the last 30, 40 years, we have come a very, very long way. So if you're talking about clinical competence or about clinical outcomes, we are as good as any other place in the world. In some cases, I should even say even better. There was a time when most well-to-do people in this country, and some not so well-to-do people also, preferred to go abroad for any treatment which was complex, whether it was surgery or even otherwise. But today I think hardly anybody really goes abroad. If you look at even the people who are in the famous personalities, whether it's film stars, politicians, large business houses, even doctors, I think everyone prefers today to have themselves treated in our country, basically because we have the infrastructure, we have the best doctors, we have just about everything, as well as the best clinical outcomes as well. So there's a slide. So this is a advertisement actually, which you're seeing in front of you, which was put across some many years ago. I will just read it. It says, the Prime Minister is making remarkable progress, so is Indian healthcare industry. This is about Dr. Manmohan Singh. Some years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, he underwent bypass surgery, and he was 80 or so at that time, and he had some complex situation at that time, but he chose to have his surgery done in India, in AIIMS, with Dr. Panda. Well, at that time, Apollo Hospitals was magnanimous enough to bring out an ad to celebrate Indian healthcare. So it says that as we celebrate the recovery of Dr. Manmohan Singh, we also celebrate another important fact. Healthcare in India has come a long way. A few years ago, highly complicated surgical procedures could hardly be performed in the country. Today, these procedures are being performed on a daily basis by Indian doctors in India. And with world-class results, hearty congratulations to AIIMS and a great team of doctors on a superlative achievement. Our country is fortunately in safe hands. In fact, I would say the roles are actually reversed. Because right now we have a booming medical tourism industry, and I don't know if I'm statistically right when I say it's almost 1/3 of the world. Patients from Middle East, Far East, Africa have been coming to our country for quite some time, and I would say that maybe a decade or a little more than that, people from even the developing economies like the USA, Canada, Europe, they have also been coming to India for their treatment. Basically because they have long waiting lists and the costs here are much less than outside, and also the fact that we have the best outcomes. It's also a matter of pride that more than 100 hospitals in India are now accredited with JCI. I think it is with immense pride we can justifiably say that India's physician community is very well educated, have great clinical expertise and commitment towards patient care. In addition, the technology and infrastructure support along with standardized protocols have made it possible for them to deliver world-class outcomes. And so, do we have cases of occasional negligence? And should we say such negligence is real or is it merely perceived? Is there really no negligence at all? Or that certain set of people believe that there is negligence? And we have to look at this in the larger context in a country like ours, where millions of surgical procedures happen on a day-to-day basis. Millions of trauma cases are attended in emergency, and another million cases, also critical care cases, are looked after in the ICU. It is quite possible that a few of them do not recover, or do not do so well, or have not received the right treatment, or whatever, it could be something worse. It is extremely sad that a few such incidents are blown out of proportion, making it look as if the entire institution and physician community are demons of some kind. I think things cannot get more unfortunate. In our own country, do we once in a while read in the newspaper that a father himself has tried to abuse his own daughter? I think we do. And do we lose trust in the father-daughter relationship thereafter? I think we don't. We look upon it as an aberration. Likewise, we need to think equally objectively when it comes to medicine. We shouldn't jump to conclusions based on isolated incidents, mismanaged or perceived to be mismanaged, and magnify and sensationalize the same, making it sound as if the whole medical fraternity is engaged in wrongdoings. Now let me share what this subject means to us, or how we even came about this topic. In the digital age and the age of social media, people have been sharing their negative experiences in healthcare management. I don't think we see so much of positive experiences. I think the positive doesn't get shared though. This includes perceived or otherwise mismanagement of cases, pure negligence sometimes. People speak of complete lack of empathy, corruption, commercialization, exploitation, and this seems to be the norm regardless of the geographies, the size of the institution, and the socioeconomic status of the people. The whispers as well as the loud talk is heard all over the place. Some of our observations confirm what we hear, and this is not once in a blue moon. It is a great piece of day-to-day conversation if we talk about healthcare as the wrongdoings. To us, it signals that there is indeed a problem and there are real challenges. Let's look at what we commonly hear regarding commercialization. Now, these remarks are illustrative and should suffice to give us a sense of the problem. If you hear this gentleman, I think his main issue on commercialization is the fact that people kept asking, are you insured? This lady, Isha, speaks about a 10-page bill which she had to pay, and she didn't understand any part of that bill. And we have Rajinder, an accounting professional, who says he's sort of sure that the doctor has received commission because he has paid 7,000 rupees for 10 tablets, and he had to go all over town to find the medicine. And then we also get media reports of this kind which adds fuel to the fire. I think everybody can identify this report which was in the papers time and again. And then we also have publications. This book is in fact edited by a very famous doctor, a well-known and famous doctor. Now these were some of the things which we had to put forth, and also I'd like to say that we had asked for a survey amongst all the participants today, and I'm happy that at least more than 75% of the people kindly consented and have participated in this survey, and we'll take a minute to see what were your viewpoints in the same case. So this is what the audience has said. What is really affecting us is the escalating costs, profiteering, needless interventions, and they look at the patient and doctor relationship as a buyer-seller relationship. This is some of the things which was actually put forth by the audience. We have summarized all of that, what you said. Now the other one which gets talked about with the same frequency or the same intensity is the lack of empathy amongst not just doctors or nurses, but the entire universe of caregivers. So we have some more testimonials. This Rima talks about the fact that when her mother passed away, in a few seconds she was referred to as a body, which sort of upset them. And we have Kalyani. If you look at her testimonial, it was more with the fact that nobody addressed her anxiety while she was sitting there and waiting. And we have Arun here, who speaks about his father, who the doctor said would die the moment he's taken off the ventilator. So they made all the arrangements for him to find that he was still alive till the day. He passed away the following day. And he said, you can imagine what sort of experience we had. And then at times we also had very inhumane conditions. This is also went viral. I think everybody spoke about this fact that this gentleman had to carry his dead wife's body 15 kilometers, and there was no one to help him. On this subject also, we had taken a survey from all of you, and we put forth the findings from the survey from this audience. And from the audience also, we would say that basically what has come out is insensitivity towards patients, poor medical education, lack of transparency, and that the care is certainly not holistic nowadays. As a junior physician or a patient, I like to believe that I have done a reasonably good job in sharing the symptoms of the malady. Now it is up to the august panel to diagnose and provide treatment for what we are about to discuss today. Thank you, and wishing you all the very best.
Thanks everyone for being here. I think we have an eminent panel. And when we thought on the panel, I think there was a lot of thinking which went behind. And I would say the only commonality in the panel is that all people represent for-profit organizations. They are in fact listed on stock exchange, barring Dr. Vita. And Fernandez Hospital has recently got converted to a foundation. But otherwise, everybody represents a for-profit industry. The panel otherwise is extremely diverse. So if you see gender diversity is 1:1. Half of them are physicians and half of them are not. You can't get better than that. A few of them are owners, a few are managers, some young, some not so young. I don't know where Harish fits in. We even have a foreigner. And possibly the only professional in the country who has a designation, Chief Purpose Officer. You can imagine how lucky we must be. So coming to the subject, as Dr. Rangana mentioned, I don't think it is about black and white, honestly. It is about a shade of grey. And I don't think it matters which shade of grey. But interestingly, the short survey we conducted, we asked people a question that when you say, has medicine lost its soul? And on a score of 1:5, if 1 meant has lost nothing and 5 meant has lost everything, what score would you give? And interestingly, of 71 responses, 82% of the people gave it a score of 3 or more. So, all I would like to state is that I think as people on this side of the table or that side of the table, there is a recognition that we do have a problem on hand, and ignoring it can never be the solution. Now, to continue the jargon which Dr. Rangana used, that the patient history taking has been done, we are aware of the symptoms, and I think the two larger issues which are being talked about are commercialization and illicit lack of empathy. I think these 2 points have emerged very, very clearly. And let's look at it more as, in fact, such an eminent panel, more as collective soul searching and trying to identify what could possibly be the triggers. And to that extent, as a collective body, what could be some of the solutions? I don't think at the end of the day we'll have a toolkit to clean the Ganges for that matter. But as long as we make some decent moves and we have some specific, tangible action points, if I may say, which can be adopted by people in the gathering here, or let's say even as society at large, it is going to help. So that's the structure I have in mind to conduct the panel discussion. And I think I must quickly add 1 or 2 things. One is that even when certain institutions get named, the idea is not to point fingers. I think we should look at them more as illustrative rather than, let's talk about who is doing what. I don't even think is important because I'm sure institutions would get named here and there. I think we should be prepared about it. The 2 is, it is not going to be the nation wants to know kind of a we don't want to get into that. Okay? So I think it's an honest attempt and we must recognize that, and that's the degree of maturity I think with which the subject deserves to be treated. Now with that preamble, let me make a beginning. And I think what I'm going to do is that we'll have about 50 or 60 minutes where we'll have 4 or 5 round of questions. And I think we can spend maybe a couple of minutes. And to that extent, I think we would have done some justice to the subject. And at the end of it all, we'll do a quick wrap-up. Then we want to have enough time for the folks in the audience to have question and answer. So honestly, I want to have about half an hour for that. And then we'll do maybe a 1 minute wrap-up. So that's the structure I have in mind. So to start to get the ball rolling, and we can just go in the sequence again, that when you say has medicine lost its soul, what is your take on the subject?
Thanks for having me here. I think you contextualized it beautifully. To me, really, I see sort of 3 different pieces of it, if I can just spend a few seconds on each of them. Number 1, I think that in socialist India, there tends to be an idea that commercialization means corruption and means lack of empathy and means lack of any sort of ethics. And I think part of that is a perception issue. I'm not saying that the issue doesn't exist, it does exist for sure. But I think it's also that we are so used to expecting healthcare to be noble and honorable which means it must be without any sort of profit-making need or desire. Then I think the minute we see anything becoming slightly commercial, it's seen as a highly negative thing by patients, by everybody involved. And I think that's the first issue. I think the second issue is that Indian patients behave very differently when they're in India. And Indian patients behave very differently when they're not in India. I think like in every other industry, I think in India, suddenly the desires, the demands are very different and the expectations are very different. The same Indian patient when they're internationally at an American hospital suddenly behave differently like the same way Indians litter in India and they don't litter in Singapore, right? Same reason. I think third issue is, I think globally, if you look at it, at least I'm seeing a fundamental change in what we've called capitalism. I think for the last 100 years, the way we've actually practiced capitalism has been so extreme and so one-sided, where there's been a zero-sum game of one person benefits, and unfortunately there's no quantification of the impact and the benefit of that capitalization on everybody, capitalism on everybody else and society, and the positive impact of what businesses are doing. And I think we've landed up in a world of high social inequalities, which includes healthcare being one of the major issues there. And I think that exact form of capitalism is really going to have to change. And honestly, I'm actually seeing it beginning to happen. In other parts of the world, not in India, people are beginning to think, large organizations are beginning to think, this form of capitalism doesn't work. We need to start measuring exactly what we're doing in positive impact on society. And many millions of people need to benefit from what we are gaining and not just look at what is our money in the bank for our shareholders and our stakeholders. And it can't be this abstract, yes, we're making a positive impact on society, but it has to be a quantifiable, like our P&L statements and like our balance sheets, a quantifiable, what is our impact on society and what is the positive that we're making. I dream of a future that in the next 20 years, capitalism will be in a different format and that will directly impact what we are doing today. Healthcare industry is so nascent in India. India is so nascent that I think we're struggling to become an industry that's mature and balanced, that is able to balance commercial stakeholder interests along with doing what the right thing is, doing what we would like to do. Most people in our system have a good intent. People are not bad. People have good intent. Everybody in our healthcare industry, but everybody feels sort of golden handcuffed by the system which encourages corruption, the system where medical education is corrupt, etc., etc. So I really hope that as we move along, we will see a far more balanced version of capitalism in the world and a far more balanced version of healthcare in India. But this is going to require some maturity. It's going to require a lot of discussion, a lot of government intervention, in my opinion. This cannot happen just by private industry having discussions. And each one of us looking deep and saying, what is it that we really want our institution to stand for? And having the courage, I think, that to follow.
Thanks, Amir.
So, Ratan, thank you again. As Amira said, thank you for having me here. And quite honestly, I almost word for word agree with everything that Amira just said, because I think she's done a wonderful job in articulating where we are today and some of the challenges we face. Having said that, so my background, quite honestly, is I'm not a lifelong healthcare professional and I'm certainly not a doctor. I entered healthcare after many, many years in the consumer goods business, retail customer-facing business. And so when I first became the CEO at Fortis Healthcare, quite honestly, the first few days, weeks, months, I was completely lost. Completely lost. Didn't have any idea what was going on. It was very awkward for me to walk a hospital because all of a sudden you have people, our Indian system as well, anybody of importance comes in, the universe starts swarming around that individual. Very awkward position to be in. So every time I go to a hospital, people expect I had all the answers. Meanwhile, I didn't even know what the questions were. Right? Complete confusion. So about 2-3 months in, I remember telling one of my friends, he said, yeah, you joined Fortis, how's it going? I said, it's a disaster. I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm completely confused. I am completely out of my element. I don't know if I'm coming okay. A bit more time on top. Spend more time trying to answer questions. A couple of months went by. I ran into my friend again. He says, it's been 4 or 5 months. How's it going? I said, much better. He says, you understand healthcare now? I said, no, but I don't think anybody else does either. And that actually was true. Because quite honestly, what I realized was that words like angioplasty, transplant, intensive care were very intimidating words. With deep, profound action functions, meanings, implications behind them. But we talked about them like we were selling gopi. How many knee surgeries, how many angioplasties, how many joints, how many stents. So I think that when you think about medicine, and where we are, I think there are 2 or 3 ground realities that we probably need to look at. Number one, healthcare globally is broken. I've spent most of my life in the US, and I can tell you, if you ask the average American, New York, Los Angeles, San Antonio, Chicago, any place, they'll tell you that the system does not work anymore. There was a time when I grew up, if you went to a doctor's office and you weren't well, you got treated, you got diagnosed, somebody checked on you, before you even thought about asking you for money. Today you go to a US doctor's office, the first thing they ask for is, do you have insurance? What's your copay? And please pay now, before you see the doctor. Unheard of 10 years ago. The world is changing. So healthcare globally, we are not in any way, shape and form. It just comes down to a degree of where we are in terms of the maturity piece that we just heard me talk about. So that's one ground reality that we should be aware of, that we're not, while we might have some challenges and issues that we're facing, I think a lot of the world have the same thing. I think the second thing we have to define is, who are we talking about when we talk about medicine? Are we talking about an ICU nurse who comes in at 9 p.m. at night and takes care of 3 patients from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., tending to every single need, whether it's putting in a catheter, whether it's changing a bedpan, whether it's just holding their hand? Because that nurse has not lost her soul at all. She actually exemplifies not good but great health. But then we have other elements in the system. We have doctors. We have doctors. All of you know doctors. I know lots and lots of doctors at Fortis, Apollo, Max, Vedanta, Manipal, every hospital in the country. They work 7 days a week. Literally work 7 days a week. They're in every single day to take care of the patients. I know a cardiologist in one of our hospitals who stayed with patients for 48 hours straight, bedside. So I think we have to start thinking about it and ask ourselves the question is, what are we solving for? There's clearly an issue here. But there are many elements in the system, in the healthcare platform today, that work exceptionally well. The reality is that the quality of healthcare in India today, the kind of clinical work that's being done today in India, is far superior to anything else that India has ever seen before. But patient expectations are changing. The bar is rising on quality, on transparency, on information. So then you think about the commercial element, and that's the part that we just talked about. Is how do you marry the commercial requirements? Look at all the private equity money that's coming into healthcare today. Not just India, by the way, globally. But if you look at the big deals that are taking place, that we're all reading about, or that we read about, it's not doctors and hospital operators that are growing. We have a lot of financial institutions coming, who have financial returns in mind. So how do you take the ground reality of a business viability with that ICU nurse who works tirelessly to take care of the patients that he or she is assigned to, with the doctors? And how do you make this entire thing come together and work? And how do you give? Because one of the things we coined was that it's time to bring medicine back into healthcare. And I think you've done a wonderful job articulating the same thing. So what we had started was in our leadership meetings, every meeting, every week, we'd ask a doctor to come in and talk about a clinical specialty. We started hospital experience programs for our administrators. So even a finance person, a controller who sat in a corporate office, spent a week a year inside a hospital. Just ultimately it's about the patient. And one day, if not already, we'll all be patients if we aren't already. I think part of the question is, let's try to get our arms around what are we solving for? The question is a very provocative question. Has medicine lost its soul? And a very appropriate one. You heard the discussion just now about the doctors that are striking. I can tell you countless number of stories. There are doctors who after a surgery that perhaps doesn't go as well as it should, actually leave through the back door so they don't have to confront the family for fear of what might happen. Exactly. So we have a massive issue. We have a big challenge. And what I think would be great is out of this forum, if we can at least start thinking about not the 20, 30 things that have to be done. What are the 3 or 4 things that we can start to think about? A, diagnose, what are we solving for? B, what are the 3 or 4 things that matter? Because the biggest tragedy of all would be is that a year from now, we have part 2 of this discussion having had the same conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And he said that when you were at Fortis, you had no idea about what was happening, and the way the Fortis saga unfolded, I don't think any of us knew what was happening. Now, coming to Dr. Chandy.
That's probably a different panel and a different discussion.
I know. So coming to Dr. Chandy, I must say that the late Mr. Y.C. Deveshwar, and when he spoke about ITC getting into healthcare, there was a very clear intent that there are serious issues, there are serious challenges with healthcare, and you have a visionary, if I may say, a bold and a large organization like ITC, which would attempt to redefine, attempt to make some of the fundamental changes. So it's a very noble, it's a very bold initiative, and we have the privilege of having someone like Dr. Chandy who is leading that initiative. So you take it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having this panel. It's a subject that I think resonates a lot with me. I just want to start by talking about a little incident, and this is a true incident, where there was this patient who I happen to know who had an adverse outcome for a relative of his. And he told me, he said, I know that there was an error of judgment on the part of the physician. And that's what finally caused the demise of my relative. But the doctor is a good man. And I know that he actually attempted to do his best. I still owe a debt of thanks for doing his best. Now, the question comes, when you're looking at this whole idea of the soul, I think the question comes, what are you prioritizing? When you deliver healthcare, is it that interpersonal relationship? Is it that coming to know the patient? Or is it your commercial proposition that is going to come on the top? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that commercial ideologies are wrong. You have to be business viable to survive, to be able to deliver what you're delivering. You have to be alive. To be alive, you need to be business viable. But that cannot trump the physician-patient relationship. That will always remain above that. If you come to a situation where your commercial instincts are going to trump the medical instincts, then it becomes a problem. That's when you start to actually lose your soul. And for me, that is the definition of losing your soul. That your higher instincts are taken over by lower, baser instincts, and it could be money, it could be power. In medical schools, sometimes to produce papers, you can use patients for that. So it can be not only money, it could be power, position, all of these things can be used to trump a higher ideal. And that is what is losing your soul. I want to quote something from a famous writer from the Times of India. And he had, his name is Anatole Royal, and he had metastatic prostatic cancer. And in one of his essays he wrote, he said, for the typical physician, my illness is a routine incident. But for me, this is a personal crisis of my life. And he said, all I want is a physician to at least understand the incongruity of that situation. and then to actually hold my hand and not only look at my flesh but also look at my soul, and then to treat me. And this is, it's a fabulous encapsulation of what medicine should be if it really has its soul. I think a lot of the other things both the other panelists have actually talked about, but I think this, for me, is what the soul of medicine is.
So I think absolutely. And there's a very interesting statement which I came across when I went to Cleveland Clinic, where somebody said that I'm not my organ. It's a very harsh statement, but that's a reality. And the second is, see, it happens so very often, and we've all seen large hospitals, mid-sized hospitals, small hospitals, that you have somebody in the family who has a very serious medical issue, life-threatening situation. The patient gets admitted to hospital, the surgery goes right, everything goes right, the family comes back home, and they still think it was a lousy hospital. So I think somewhere what we are talking about is life beyond clinical outcome. And and you spoke about soul. In fact, I remember Dr. Abraham Verghese in Stanford, and he actually talks about that you have treated the patient, but how about healing? So healing is different than treating. So I think we're talking about a very fundamental issue, the way you brought it up. Now, Dr. Vita.
Thank you for having me here, Mr. Jalan. I'm afraid my experience is limited to one specialty, and it's been my passion to serve women and make it safe for women to go through their pregnancies and birth. And if you ask me, we have lost the soul somewhere in this journey where we birth women, because childbirth today is facing a crisis. We've got C-sections going through the roof. We've got women talking about traumatic birth stories of being coerced into accepting things that instinctively they know are not right, but are afraid to talk to the obstetrician or the doctors. We also know that women suffer disrespect and abuse. We know, and there's enough research to say, that the way we are born and the way we give birth is going to impact a woman for the rest of her life, and it's going to impact that baby in the way that baby grows. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of 26 million births a year in this country. So I'm talking about beginning the story, and we're birthing the next humanity. And if we don't get it right there, then we are contributing to a whole generation of mothers who start life as mothers, losing their self-esteem, emotionally scarred, post-traumatic stress, and sometimes leading to suicide. And why have we gone this way? Because somewhere we've lost that whole ability to believe that women can birth naturally. The body is built to hold a baby, the body is built to give birth. But the way we've been trained, we look at pregnancy as a catastrophe waiting to happen. And so now we've got different types of birthing experiences. We built hospitals to offer the wow experience, but we've lost that ability to actually look into the eyes of that woman and say, what is it you want for this birth? A lot of us are looking at also the commercial angle. There was a simple campaign from a woman who said, hospitals need to put their statistics of their C-sections across the country. I signed that campaign, and before I signed, I spoke to my core group I said, I am signing this because I think it's time we are transparent. And there were only 3 hospitals across the country that agreed to put up our statistics for C-sections. So we've lost the ability to be honest. I too believe we've lost our soul. And it's time we get back to where we need to give women a chance to speak. We need to listen to women's voices. I'm speaking from the perspective of birthing. And I tell you, it will happen because women are beginning to talk. The White Ribbon Alliance had a whole campaign and they asked 150,000 women across 32 districts and 5 states, what is it which is the most important thing you want when you are pregnant and you give birth? And top of the list was respect and dignity. And it's not just underprivileged women. This is what you hear across the board, from vice presidents of companies to the poorest. What do women want? Tell me what you want to do with my body. Ask my permission before you touch me. Give me a clean bed. Let me have a birth companion with me. And we deny this because we doctors think we know it all. I'm sorry, but I do believe we have a lot to think about. And I'm focusing on 26 million births a year.
Thank you, Dr. Rita. And I think maternal health, reproductive health, neonatal issues are some of the most fundamental issues in the country. And I think, as Dr. Vita said, the transparency is really, really a big deal to cue a sense of trust and confidence. And as she said, that I've known that Fernandez Hospital, one of the very few hospitals in the country which actually publishes C-section data on their website every month. So it's not just about saying things, it's also about doing what you say. So thanks a lot, Harish now.
It's, I don't know, sometimes you feel embarrassed that I'm wearing a tie and a suit, so this is one of those occasions. And I was looking at this boy's picture, the light in his eyes, and the topic what we are saying. Like, I'm always a confused soul. I'm not even sure whether heaven or hell exists. Forget about the soul part. But I have a few points to say that if you look at economies, what we call as traditionally the South, the developing economies, what we are debating today is not an Indian issue. It's actually a global issue which cuts across the whole planet. Wherever you have humans, as long as human beings are doctors, you will have this kind of questions being asked. Having said that, as an Indian, coming back to the context, I used to get worried that because I come from Kerala. In Kerala, in 1957, there was a democratic choice to go to the left. And the left has got a certain mind space about investing in social capital, in education and health sectors. So from 1957, the state of Kerala has invested 5% of GDP to those two sectors. And hence we have, I would say, probably one of the most advanced public health systems in the country. But even in spite of having 70 years of an advanced public health system, this question is also asked in the state of Kerala. I run the largest chain of private hospitals in the state of Kerala. So this is something for all of you to think about. So I used to wonder as a citizen of the country that when will healthcare be a political topic? In Kerala it has been since 1950s. But Kerala is a very tiny state. So wonder when is healthcare going to be a major topic of discussion in the central government. So, the pundits can sit and debate about how did Modi win the elections. But in my belief, my core belief is that he got one thing right, is this insurance scheme for 500 million citizens. We have tons of data out there that single exposure to private healthcare, how much it contributes towards acute poverty of millions of citizens. It's taken for granted. somewhere healthcare ought to be a fundamental right of the citizen where economics is not a barrier to access at least basic norm of healthcare. Now, we are sitting and debating here because of structural issues in the system what we have. We have a regulatory agency which is toothless. I don't know any instance where our regulatory agency has actually debarred or removed the license of a clinician to practice because of a recorded thing. We also have the system like in Arabic there's a term called wasta. Like let's say between Evita and I, we are doctors, but we know each other very well socially. If I do something wrong and I'm pulled up and she's sitting there, she will never file a complaint against me ever. The doctors, the lawyers, it's a professional brotherhood or sisterhood, so to speak. So that's also an ethical issue. The other big problem when we talk about, fine, the central government has really done that. There is an information asymmetry. The exciting thing about what I see today is that why is all this literature, why are we sitting here and debating on this topic? Because somehow the youth of today, they have managed to overcome, thanks to the internet, the availability of power and a smartphone. Information asymmetry is going. Like today we make fun of patients who go and access the Google doctor before they come to the real doctor. Every patient who comes, the old days we find that the doctors like Paramatma, you find the slippers kept outside and you really blindly believe what the clinician says. Today it's so difficult to be a clinician because you know that you have a skeptical patient sitting in front of you who has got access to information. He does not have the ability or an education to process information correctly, but at least the power equations have changed. So this is something which is also contributing the kind of skepticism. Now, I just want to say one instant. On 30th of last month, an auto rickshaw driver had brought his 23-year-old son to my hospital in Kochi. He was referred from a peripheral hospital with history of fever for 10 days, loss of sensorium, totally confused. He's got all kinds, it looks like an epileptic or an encephalitic episode. So the ER team got activated, they stabilized the patient, the neurologist on call was informed, he did the required blood chemistry, MRI was done as per the protocols, discussions took place, and the MRI was something interesting. It had a starry sky image, which is not what you normally see in an encephalitic patient. So this is 30th of May. So next day we are talking about 31st is over, so the information is still coming over. The clinician looked at all the parameters and found that this is so unusual and told the auto rickshaw driver, his father, the child's father, said that I want to do a specific panel of investigations. This test is not available in Kochi. We have to take the sample and send it to Bangalore to an enabled accredited lab. It's going to cost you 25,000 rupees. This is the conversation which actually took place. Now the auto rickshaw driver, the father, obviously his son is, and this is something very relevant to the topic what we said. He was so worried now. Is this another aspect of trying to squeeze the family, trying to take an extra buck out of the family? So he said that fine, since you really say that this is required to come to a diagnosis, let me have a family conference and come back to you guys. So he called his friends, other auto rickshaw drivers. They all actually pulled whatever money they had to pay, 25,000 rupees, and gave the green signal. Please go ahead with the sample. Now the report was processed on the 1st of June. The laboratory in Bangalore called up the treating consultant and said that unusually you did a viral panel, but Nipah has come positive. Right? So this is the first index case in our country's history, 2001 episode, 2007, last year, 2018, and this is the first index case who's actually alive, is doing extremely well, and thankfully no deaths this time due to Nipah. So this is a very unusual case where a private hospital has rightly diagnosed, detected, and then it's also a social call because the moment you have Kerala is so advanced, people are so worried because the people are so educated, so the news spreads all around the place. But there was absolutely no panic because there is a drill which everybody has to do, public and private sector. But the cost of care is enormous. So nobody talks about the bill or any of that matter. The person has been isolated, been looked after well, and he's doing extremely well. The nurse, the caregivers, now this is something else, but Bhavdeep also explained. There was no panic among the caregivers, among the doctors, the nurses. Last year, remember, because of Nipah, 17 people lost their lives. Out of 17 people, 16 of them from the Kozhikode Medical College, because the first index patient, Mohammed Sabir, who was taken to the Kozhikode Medical College, he infected everyone in the emergency department, he infected everybody in the CT room and also in the ICUs. All the deaths were from the caregivers and the patient attendants in the public hospital. You saw about the news story of what happened to the children in Uttar Pradesh. Every year, I guarantee you that every year you hear about fever-related deaths across the country, but we don't know what the hell is happening. So there is a kind of a moral debate that where does the buck stop? But there are structural issues which we need to address. The structural issues are, for example, we can't hide away from the fact that there are black sheep within us. There are black sheep. We don't have enough. The example I gave you about Kerala is that maximum amount of public sector investment by the state has been done for the state of Kerala. But Kerala, the majority of healthcare actually given to the population is by the private sector. 70% of the population in the state of Kerala, the healthcare delivery system is from the private sector. In spite of this big need, then can you imagine that this subcontinent of ours, what's going to happen?
Now, Lara, the Chief Purpose Officer.
So, I am loving the reflections that I'm having. I think that what all of them mentioned, like capitalism, crisis of the world, healthcare crisis, human relationship, our clinical outcome instead of outcome to society, basically losing the why. So, if we see all of these, and then I was remembering my conversation with my youngest daughter yesterday in the car. So, my father is a medical doctor, and I wanted to be a medical doctor, but then I decided to do business school. But then I entered to healthcare because I told medical doctors work too much. My father worked too much, and maybe I don't want to work too much. I didn't know that I would work also too much. But yesterday when we were talking in the car and then I was asking them what they wanted to do, so anyone told anything different. And then I told nobody wants to be a medical doctor like a grandpa. And they told no. And then my youngest told me, no, mommy, I don't want, because if I make a mistake, it's a life that will be lost. And immediately I jumped and I thought, yeah, but everybody makes mistakes. But if you do it right, you will save a life. So from this conversation yesterday and listening to everybody, I think now I more or less understand what I am doing in India since last year. I believe that if there is one place that we can recover the soul is India. There is so much goodness here. And when I arrived here, probably we have one of the worst ratio of sales to population in the world. We do not sell so much here. But then you look back and you say, what really matters in India? No? If you want to do something here, you have to do something that is completely disruptive, not focused on commercial or whatever. But basically, what I felt is that we have to recover our why here. And since last year, we were trying to bring this inspiration that exists in India. So in our kickoff meeting, there is a meeting that we put everybody together to decide strategies and to talk. And it was when we stopped the sales targets. So how everybody will react if we stop sales target, everybody is commercially focused. Everybody is lots of competition in India. Everybody, MBA, wants to have career. Then we asked the team itself. So if we want to do something in India and want to go beyond our medicines, and we really want to make a difference here, what we do, we focus on healthcare, not in our medicines. So then we delegated everything to the team and told you will build this kickoff in a way that will inspire our team to do something much bigger. And in the middle of the first day, they brought a sir that he's a dialysis patient, and he has one hospital, Business Cruz, and he was explaining his business model here. And he doesn't call patients, he calls guests, and he pays rewards to the employees on the hemoglobin level of patients. So we were like so overwhelmed with this inspiration. And then, since then, the way that we want to work is somehow really to bring back the soul. We will by the end have business, but if you focus first in people, in patients, and to really impact society, I think that this is something that will make a very big difference. And as Mira was telling, yes, the world is in a big mess. At the same time, there is this moment where, for example, corporate share value starts to appear in the United States. In the United States, when they are making examples of corporate share value and telling how to give back to society and still makes money, they give the example of the eye hospital in India. So the Western world, when they are trying to bring back soul, they are looking at examples from India. And me as a foreigner coming to India and liking to work with purpose, with goodness, for me is like is the best way for me to do what I want to do. So my team right now, like 2 days before we had the sales review meeting that we have, that we don't call sales review anymore, is the vision progress. In the middle of the meeting, they brought a lady that she's, I think, 70 years old. She's a lung cancer patient, and she was coming to tell her story. The whole time what she was telling was trying to show us what are the hurdles and where we can help. Because this is the objective that we would like to have. So for me, I think that listening to everybody, I think that it's right. Somewhere in the journey we lost the soul. But at the same time, we can work together to recover it.
Thank you so much. I think, as Harish did point out, when you look at the visual, I think there is a clear sense of optimism that the world hasn't come to an end. And if I were to quickly summarize what I heard from some of you, we did talk about global scenario, and I think I remember reading a book. The title was Healthcare System and Oxymoron. So I think it's a global issue, some place less, some place more. We spoke about rising expectations. We spoke about that in the entire process, have we lost sight of the patient? I think something which you brought. What Bhavdeep said is that when we say health medicine lost its soul, and when we're trying to find a solution, who are we talking about? I think that's again something very, very crucial. So what I would do now, because we certainly are running short of time, and I want to have some time for the question and answers, is if each of you can, if you can be a little more brief, if I may use the word, that what do you think could be the trigger or could be the factors which create, if I may say, an environment for some of these things to happen? And to that extent, what could be the solution? Something which could be done. The only preface or the only comment I would like to make is that, is there a belief somewhere that you cannot be completely, and when I'm saying completely, I actually mean completely, you can't be completely honest and transparent in healthcare and still meet your business objectives. So, is there a belief somewhere that whatever gets done is inevitable? You just can't do things otherwise. I mean, in fact, if you look at the real estate industry in the country, for a long period of time, people felt that, given the land mafia, the politician, and whatever, that you can't be in real estate and cannot be completely honest. So, in fact, it is a fundamental problem of, if I may say, a belief, justified or otherwise. So I think that's just a preamble. But frankly, starting from Meera, if you could just give a quick view on what do you think could be some of the factors, and hence what could be the steps which one could take as solution, please.
Well, I think the simplest and most effective solution would be government reform and policy. Because like you gave the example of real estate and the radar law coming into place. I mean, it's not like the builders were self-regulating and put this law for themselves, right? I mean, honestly, I think, especially as Indians, I think we need discipline. And we need, we all as human beings, we react to carrot or stick. Either there has to be a motivation to, to behave in a certain manner and we get rewarded for it. Either there would be, tax benefits, there would be some benefit, etc. that gives you that. Or there is a stick which says if you don't behave like this, there is going to be punishment. Now today in our healthcare system, there is neither. Frankly, for all of us who are sitting on this panel, we've tried, I spent 18 years of my life trying my best to build a quality organization that follows ethical standards. But am I rewarded for it? Not at all. Right? I can sleep well at night at home, but which is the main moral compass, but there's nobody rewarding you for it. Neither patient, neither doctor, neither government, nobody. So unless there is carrot and stick, I don't think this is going to work. We may all say to ourselves, let's self-regulate, let's an association get together. It doesn't happen. We are, again I'm saying as Indians, we are the first to break form and we are the first to break formation. I have seen many times associations come together and say we all behave like this, and in 2 days time somebody has broken the agreement. So I think in my opinion, and we also have to realize that with regulation comes a loss of choice. Because when we are waiting for the government to regulate us, it is not going to be regulation based on what we want. It is going to be regulation based on what they want, how they see the industry. So if we are smart, we will self-regulate and we will self-balance before we wait for somebody else to come and whack us with the ruler and make us behave. But I am not seeing that happening today. I think the only way forward is going to be government regulation. And honestly, I don't know when that's going to come in place. The government is talking about it, but the government is talking a lot about affordability, which is important. But I'm not seeing the government talk about minimum standards, government talk about clinical outcomes, honesty, transparency. I mean, today we are talking about the soul being lost in medicine, in private sector. Let me tell you, the public sector is far worse. I mean, today you have drugs that go to district hospitals and majority will get stolen and leaked outside and sold to patients which are not even in the government hospitals, right? So we are talking about a system which is quite endemic. And I believe that the only way this is going to get fixed is going to be government reform. We do have a government that seems to have intent, at least for wanting to do something in healthcare, making it an electoral issue. But I would definitely like to see more work from it from a minimum standards perspective and an enforcement of that. But I think we're still many years away.
Thanks, Dina, and I think if I can just add to that, is that are there ways to identify corruption? I'm sure there are. And to that extent, are there ways to reward the folks who do right or punish the folks who don't do it right? And I think the point is that if governmental regulation is one driver to make things change, I think sooner it happens, the better it is.
I'll try not to repeat what Mayor said, because I think the whole notion of what is the model that we're functioning under is really the big discussion, a big conversation. Because private industry, ultimately, what do you do? Whether you're in the construction industry, whether you're in agriculture, whatever, healthcare, you back into the model that's been established as a platform which governs the rules by which we all play. So I think there's a clear point there. I think the other thing we have to think about is this whole notion of communication and transparency. Now, one of the slides that were put up earlier, and you all recall a couple of years back, 2 or 3 of the major hospital players went through some major issues. You had the dengue case that was referenced earlier. You had the case of the twins in the Max Hospital, stillborn twins. That case got a lot of prominence as well. Quite honestly, that story became much, much different by virtue of communication. Sometimes lack of communication, sometimes poor communication. The headlines that were flashed talked about the number of gloves that were used, for example, in the dengue child. Right? The first issue the communication issue was that there was dengue shock syndrome versus dengue. When you have dengue shock syndrome, you start having organ failure. And then the treatment plan is completely different. So I think the whole notion of communication and being absolutely transparent, working with collaborating, whether it's the industry together, whether it's with the media, whether it's with the government, I think separate from what we just said, I think is a major, major issue for us. I'll leave us with one thought. Very rarely do you have an entire ecosystem where none of the stakeholders are happy. The healthcare industry today has 7 key participants. You have the patient, you have the doctor, you have the operator, you have the investor, you have the government, you have the vendor partner, and you have the insurance player. 7 are unhappy. Rarely do you have a situation where every single stakeholder goes home unsatisfied. So I think that apart from anything else we recognize and discuss here today, is that we probably don't have a lot of time. And whatever action has to happen, it has to happen fairly quickly.
Absolutely. And just to add one point to what Bhavdeep said about communication, I remember there was a global research which said that on an average, when a patient starts speaking, the physician interrupts him after 43 seconds. And if the physician allows him to continue, he will probably take another 14 seconds. So I think there is a serious issue about lack of communication. And as Dr. Anna mentioned, a lot of what is happening is real, but then there is a lot which is basically perception. Okay.
Yeah, I think I just want to touch on two topics. It's a very big thing of how we would try and reform this. I think if you look at it from a physician's perspective, the only physician or person in medicine who's studying medicine who thinks that all the answers as far as diagnosis or treatment protocols is black and white or 100% is the medical student. As you go through the thing, you begin to realize there's a lot more grey. Very often your treatment protocols or what you need to be doing, sometimes there's a little bit of grey, you need to sort of use clinical judgment. Now just imagine, in that situation, there's a subliminal incentive that if you do this, you'll get more money, if you do this, you'll get less money. Even if you're a very good person, even if you're a very ethical person, let me tell you, you'll fall on the side of where there's more money. There's no question about it. And our current ecosystem promotes that. And that for me is part of the reason why we've lost our soul. We are incentivizing people to do procedures. We're incentivizing people to refer more cases for diagnostic tests. And people can say that it doesn't happen, it's only a handful of places. Every single laboratory, part of their plans will sometimes, I'm not saying every single, but many of them. If you go to Delhi, you talk to many of the laboratories there, they have a plan actually of how these things will be incentivized. Now can you imagine a physician who's sitting there, and I'm talking about good physicians. What will happen if you have the subliminal incentive? So the problem is to set this ecosystem right. Now how do you set this ecosystem right? Now we're talking about telling your physicians, be ethical, be transparent with your patients, because it's not the administration who's going to be transparent with the patients. It's going to be the doctors, the nurses, the people who are in the front of house. And you're telling all of them, show compassion, be transparent, do all of these things for your patients. But as administration, we are not transparent with our employees. We don't show compassion to our employees. We don't promote that whole system of trust. We sometimes play off one physician against the other so that, we can get more productivity. So you begin to see physicians who are stealing each other's patients. And I'm being very blunt about this. When you have this kind of ecosystem, how are you going to promote compassion to the patient, transparency to the patient, when within your own organization, between employees, between administration and this thing, you don't have that ecosystem? That becomes a problem. And I work in institutions which have this ecosystem and don't have this ecosystem. I've seen the difference. It's slowly, if you have a good ecosystem, it is effective. It slowly starts going across and everybody says, this particular institution, this is how they do things. And everybody starts doing it that way. If you have it being done a different way, that's the way people are. You finally have this cultural mindset within the organization. And I think that is, it's very important for us when we are building organizations to establish that cultural ecosystem which promotes all of these things. Transparency, trust, compassion, and ethical care.
Thanks, Dr. Chandy. Dr.
Yeah. difficult to answer that we don't have ready-made solutions. But I'm convinced that those of us who have the privilege and the responsibility of running our own organizations, whether you've inherited it or put it, set it up, you're not answerable to anybody but yourself. And it's extremely important that we ask ourselves, why are we here and why are we in this service. So if your focus is clear, your values are clear, and if you happen to be leading, then you have no other choice but to lead by example. And that's the toughest bit. And I agree with you. If I'm not honest and I don't tell my billing guy, I want you to be honest, you're not going to fudge anything. If a patient has been charged and you discover it, you need to return that money. So it has to start with that. We have a simple rule. We tell our mothers, if you want me at your birth, but I'm not able to be there because of this reason, you will be told the truth. A simple thing. We wouldn't ask our junior to go and fib about me doing something else. So it all starts with that. So we who are in privileged positions of leadership set the tone. I think there's no other way. Secondly, I do believe that there are many other people who feel strongly about this. Connect with them. For me, I've got my mentor here, Dr. G. N. Rao. For me, L.V. Prasad is one model that gives me a lot of hope that it can be done. And if you are running an organization, it's not easy. You don't make as much money when you're ethical, when you're honest, when you're compassionate, when you cross-subsidize. Your profits are not enormous. But if you can run it and pay your staff well, pay them all the benefits, pay your taxes. Now we're a foundation, so that's a little better for everything. But if you are absolutely clear, talk to medical students, get them to come and walk around with you and say, hey guys, you can run a hospital and make profit and stay clean. And I think if you can give hope to the next generation, I think India is going to do well.
Thank you so much.
I have to slightly disagree with Evita, because my belief is that if you run a good system, I look at a system point of view, and that's why I said in my earlier statement, it's a systemic issue. So I have 2 points. One is that we have a live case study of being a very transparent system which is completely focused on clinical governance, highly profitable, fantastic margins. Because that's what I'm trying to say, in today's world, you cannot fudge anything because the consumer is all aware of things. And if you do things rightly, honestly, you don't have to spend. The greatest marketer for you is your own patient and your own relatives. Few simple things when we hire clinicians. In my hospital, I don't allow a new doctor to work for 7 days, irrespective of the seniority. Because mostly I hire the doctors, I tell them in the conversations that if you join Aster for 7 days, you can't see any patient. Because we have a robust induction program, which is basically introducing you to the whole culture of care. I'm normally the opening batsman. I go and talk to them about lessons we have to learn from across the country and overseas. What has gone wrong? And most of the lessons are so simple. The intent being that everyone is honest, everyone has tried their best, but still things have gone wrong. Why has it gone wrong? That's the first thing what we say. Second thing I tell the doctors is please know your limits, especially for surgeons. It's very important to know that where your limits are. Don't try to be a hero. The third important aspect is that when we do contracts for physicians, we really believe in the concept of collaborative medicine. So we build teams of clinicians into subspecialty folk. We don't give individual contracts to a doctor. It's basically a team of doctors so that they have a group practice model, which really worked well. Fourth thing is that when you do your credentialing and privileging, look at the pedigree of training. Now, I've always wondered that if you hire a physician from AIMS, CMC Vellore, JIPMA, SGPGA Lucknow, St. John's, Amrita, there are a few institutions, about 11 institutions in the country. In my experience, these doctors, their behavior, their moral compass is somewhat different from others. So one solution for me is that going back into undergraduate training and postgraduate training to figure out how do we fix the moral compass. We don't have good teachers in our country. We have a short supply of teachers. So that is something which we need to address.
That's great. Medical education. Thank you.
So I will try to make a view different. So what I see when I come to India, the opportunity and what can leapfrog healthcare. So basically what I see is a huge opportunity and momentum in India right now, that if you have a very clear objective as a society and private and public sector together, that would be, for example, what if 15, 20 years from now we are focusing on the patient centricity. So we have patient in the center and we aim a decrease in the aging cost of society. And how you would do this for me is like three bases: is the collaboration, the patient centricity itself, and the technology. And how is the collaboration, the private and the public sector? Why the public sector is working, for example, in the Ayushman Bharat and then in the national health stack. Today, digital health is something that can make a very big difference. And the national health stack today has the same people working that work with Aadhaar. It's the only country in the world that can implement, for example, value-based healthcare. Because you can use metadata and you can use something that is just connecting the private and public sector. And what if everybody of us as leaders in the healthcare sector, we decide that when we are implementing a technology or something, we are thinking what is the best outcome for the patient, the citizen, but not only this patient journey, but in the whole citizen life. And then we can gather data, so the government can make the right policy, but we are helping with this. So this is a kind of very small summary of what I visualize here in India.
Thanks so much, Lara. So I'll try to do an impossible job of summarizing everything in a minute. So Amira spoke about government regulation as being one key influencer to help set things right. Bhavdeep spoke about communication. He also mentioned that there is a great need for urgency because everybody seems to be rightly unhappy with the system. Dr. Chandy spoke about medical education per se. He spoke about the entire ecosystem. He spoke about the kind of moral dilemma which people have because the wrong ecosystem. Dr. Vita spoke about that some of us, let's put it that way, we need to walk the talk. I mean, one way to do it is to lead by example, start doing things right, so that it also inspires some others. Harish made a very interesting point that the patient ambassador, if you actually create a strong sense of trust can actually help you generate good profits. It's not that you need to compromise on profits. And finally, Lara said that we also need to look at it in a very collaborative, in a very holistic sense. As a society, she spoke about how businesses can redefine their role, their function. Okay, I mean beyond just ending state in terms of business objective. And finally, I think she talked about the role of technology. So that's my quick take. Now, before I open the floor for question and answer, a couple of requests. One is, don't give answers, please ask questions. If you have multiple questions, choose the one which you think is most important, because if you're going to ask me, can I ask 2 questions, I'll say which is the second one. Don't make profound statements. If you have them to make, write to me. Next time I'll try to get you on the panel. So, please, raise your hand.
Panel discussed what is gone wrong. I am Ved Prakash from Hyderabad. Soul is the wrong word. You can replace it with heart. Soul, without soul, nobody survives. No discussion. Heart creates compassion. So, one for you. The other question I want to ask, all of them have forgotten. The parents have had a big role. We criticize everything else but ourselves. Have we looked inside as parents? Have we done enough to bring our child up in a more ethical way? Ethics as a subject is lost in our society.
So I think one of us get you right, sir. One is obviously the heart versus soul. But does parenting have a role to play?
So I just want to answer the question in a different way. Like Ratan was wondering how old am I when he was trying to fix me in the panel. So I belong to the sandwich generation, 1965, 1975. You have to figure out where I am. So the thing is that I have two boys. Like my older son is working and my younger one is just going into his 11th. And I looked at my experience as a child, my father's generation. And I'm looking at me as a parent for my children. It's completely different. Like my wife is kind of paranoid to send my kid even to the supermarket nearby. It's a very secluded, safe, sanitized kind of an environment. It's not the environment which I was exposed to. So there is a complete change, cultural shift happening in the whole aspect of parenting. But you're so right that we as parents, and that's why I talked about the faculty. For me, in fact, no powerful, no greater parent in an educational system than a good teacher in a medical institution, especially in undergraduate level or even a postgraduate level. So parenting is crucial.
Okay, so someone else? Yeah.
The first thing when I got Ratan's invitation to come here was, I said, let me look up the dictionary, what does soul mean? So I got hold of the Collins dictionary, the old one, and they said the soul is the part of you that consists of your mind, character and thoughts. And I think Dr. Fernandez has put it so beautifully that if you have the courage of conviction, you can make an organization, run it well and make money. And the other thing, I'll just take half a minute, that for the doctors and the healthcare providers, the liberal art education should become a part of the medical training. Why I say so is that I don't know how many people sitting here would have read A.J. Cronin's Citadel. I think there would be 5, 7, 10, not even 10. That was the book which formed the basis of creating national NHS in England. So I think if you read that doctor who went to work in that Wales country, in the coal mines, also had a dilemma because he was married, he needed to support his family and then then he went to London and did everything other than what he was doing there. So this soul is always be catching. So liberal art education, and I think like what Dr. Fernandez said, standing by your courage of conviction is important.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please.
You're absolutely right about that. The art of medicine is understanding the humanity of medicine. And that's why the word humanities come. In fact, I believe that good medical education should only be provided to people who are interested in the arts. Because you need to be understanding the human condition. And the ability to understand the human condition deeply comes through the arts. So, not only, literature, music, painting, everything. And I think a good medical education would incorporate that.
Somebody could give a mic to God. We'll come to you, ma'am, after this, please.
So do you think that we are in a phase of medicine where new tools and technologies will ultimately help in solving the mundane part of a doctor's job, and that the soul searching or the real doctor-patient connection will happen only when they are freed of those, by being able to give them the right tools and technology? So when AI, when you add genomics or other things to the mix, do you think that will happen or it will get worse?
You want to take that? The role technology could play in your mind?
I don't think, one of the discussions we have very often is technology. It's not just in healthcare, by the way, all industries are talking about. The US, Western Europe is rampant with robots. Right? You're hearing about this everywhere. On driverless cars, etc., etc. So the whole notion of robotic surgery, all these things are happening. I think the simplest way to look at this is not a question of or, it's a question of and. And technology is merely an enabler because there's nothing in the world that can replace the power of a nurse holding a patient's hand, a doctor holding a patient's hand, I'll tell you very anecdotally, very, very quickly. My father is 90 years old. He's an educated, highly educated person, ran a medical healthcare organization in the US as well. About a year back, he went for an MRI. He knows what an MRI is. He's very familiar with it, having run healthcare systems, worked in geriatric environment. And he's getting an MRI, he knows exactly what's going to happen, he knows exactly what he's going to do. And as we walk in, the new MRI suites, lots of lights, lots of instruments, very sophisticated, a very bare looking room. And my father walks to the walker and he had to leave the walker outside, so I was holding his hand and walking him in. And as we get closer, an educated man who knows exactly what's going to happen next, he says, "Mera haath nahi chhod." He says, "Don't let go of my hand." So I think it will never replace it. It will be an enabler. I think they come together. Yeah, so I think they work together.
I think the point is that it certainly has a role to play, and we don't have to look at it as substituting something. Mr. Chandra.
Hi, I'm Chandana. What about the role of the cost of medical education? If a student ends up spending close to 2 crores or above to get an MD and an education that has no moral compass, and you get into an ecosystem which incentivizes everything that you shouldn't be doing, then who's to blame? So where do we begin?
So I think if your medical seat costs you crores, then where does the ROI come from? So
the good thing in the scenarios, the Supreme Court of India has taken some bold decisions already in terms of each state having a fee regulatory commission. So if you look at we have data about what's the cost of UG program in AIMS, for example. But if you look at some states, it's for a UG program, it's around 5 lakh rupees. So that fees has already been fixed up. There has been a very thought-provoking article by Dr. Devi Shetty in today's Times of India, where he has suggested a completely out-of-the-box model about producing 30,000 doctors by just changing the curriculum approach towards undergraduate program. And the National Board of Exams, for example, if you look at your MCA recognized MD or DN program or MS or MCH versus the DNB program, the costs are completely different. You are able to produce that thing. So I think we have a laboratory and an opportunity to reduce the cost of educational programs in this country.
I think there is certainly a growing need to increase the supply, if I may say, of quality medical colleges and institutions. And it does require some out-of-the-box thinking, as you pointed out, and the government obviously has a role to play as a regulatory body once. Regulatory and maybe facilitating body once. Please. Sure.
So I think that Devi's article today is extremely timely. The one thing, and while we haven't seen any data on it yet, I think in the next 12 to 18 months, perhaps 24 months, we'll see some information on the number of medical students that are dropping out of medical school. And the most obvious and the most conspicuous of this group are actually doctors' children. I can tell you that when the industry changes that are taking place, doctors are routinely telling their children, कुछ करना है तो जाओ कोई startup शुरू करो, because that's where all the excitement is. Go build the next Flipkart. So I think we're going to start seeing data in the next 12, 24 months, which is why I think Manish Devi's article is exactly timely, because quite honestly, while we know about the fact that India is short 2,000 oncologists, the reality is that we're going to have a massive shortage across the board, a disease burden going through the roof, and I think that's a big issue when we think about the future.
There's a conversation I had with Mr. J.P. Chaudhary of Akash Institute. They are big time into medical coaching and education. And he was mentioning that a lot of girls are getting into medical education. I said, that's an interesting development. He said, not really, because they're not interested in practicing. The parents saying that's one way to get better practices. Okay. Yeah. Please, sir, you. Yeah, I'll come. Please.
Thank you for that amazing discussion. I'm Dr. Nitesh Agarwal. I'm a pediatrician. I deal with newborns who are very sick in the ICU. So I feel personally that medicine has not lost it. So definitely no. And to put it into perspective,
What's your question?
my question is, how much is there a role of the general public, not the doctors, not the medical service providers, in maintaining the medicine's soul in the place it should be?
So what you're saying is that is there a role people have to play? Okay, I'm just saying the problem is hardly there. Any other question? Please, someone at the back.
Hi, my name is Harsha. My question is basically, while we have only been touching upon what should a doctor do, what should the nurse do, how important is the question on how do we set expectations with the patient, particularly because my personal experience has been transparency has never been good. The more transparent we are, especially when we say, hey, you know what, this is a mistake that has happened, it could have been happened, it always ends up backfiring, which leads the medical fraternity to go back into its shell.
So Dr. Harsha, Dr. Mehndi, he's talking about...
So I think the issue is very often we become transparent at the point that something went wrong. The thing is to be transparent right from the beginning. So I'll give you a simple example. When I moved to the UK as a surgeon, I had to go and take consent. So, the first time being smart, I said, let me take one of the local guys to see how consent is taken. And he was taking consent for an inguinal hernia. And he listed out about 15 possible complications. I was thinking to myself, if I did this here, in India, back in India, we used to just tell them, about 4 complications, and we would, if at all, and everybody said, don't tell a whole lot of complications because then he'll run away from me and go. But I found that actually it made a huge difference. We were telling them, these are the possible things that can happen, including, rare things like nerve entrapment syndrome, inguinal hernia. The thing is to start right at the beginning, not at the end, not when a problem has happened. At that point, you haven't developed that relationship. That's a wrong time actually. So the issue is to make sure right from the get-go, you're transparent and you develop that relationship. At that point, let me tell you, even if something has gone wrong, which is reasonable, not something, which borders on negligence. If there's something reasonable, most people are alright. I have seen it repeatedly. I've seen it repeatedly that people are alright because you've got a relationship with the patient.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mahesh. I think you had a question. Dr. Mahesh. I'll come.
Yeah, I have out of my experience, I feel that there is so much emphasis on knowledge and skills of healthcare providers, but the attitude domain is neither stressed upon while during training and while hiring. And if that element is not there, you are putting wrong people on the right job. And I think if you look at only knowledge and skills, patients don't understand what is your qualification, how is your skill level in terms of doing this. It's that attitude domain. Do any of your institutes actually focus on attitudinal domain when you are hiring either your top or the ground level people? It's a question.
There is this whole culture, what I call the Primadonna physician. So if you ask anybody who's starting a healthcare thing, they say, how are you going to start? I'm going to go and find this, real top-class physician who's already got lots of patients, bring him in here, and he's going to he may come with his team and he'll dominate. The thing is, you ask any physician, is it a prima donna who gives good outcomes or is it a team that gives good outcomes? And when you mean team, it means everybody right down to the physiotherapist. If you develop teams which are competent, that is more important than having these prima donna surgeons inside.
When we talk about culture, the key question is, are we talking about the institutional culture or are we talking about the physician's culture? So, yeah, please.
Subramaniam, I'm an anesthesiologist. There's a big role the press and the media is playing in hyping the so-called wrong incidents, and very often without knowing what exactly has happened. And this leads to a lot of mistrust among the public concerning the medical care. It could be the dengue issue or it could be any of those. The way the media has the power to sensationalize something, and it's always the negative thing which sells. So how do you deal with this? I mean, this is one of the key reasons why public is losing trust on doctors. Because Amir Khan comes on a show and bashes doctors there, and there's no one to defend.
So I completely agree with you. Now all I can say is that there is a very nice book called Factfulness. It's a book which was recommended by Bill Gates. And the book actually talks about why good news can never be news. And if some of you have seen the website called the Better India, you now have people who actually have taken this responsibility to treat good news as news. But it's something which is very fundamental, I think, which, let's say, hopefully, and I'm just saying, when you talk about media, you talk about society, I think we'll also start expecting or respecting or appreciating good news. You had something, ma'am. Mike.
So we live today in a very interconnected and extremely disconnected world at the same time. So we have information, we have people, the younger generation today is extremely clueless about personal connects. We're talking about situations when you go into the workplace, but 5 years of education, and which the panelists have already spoken about the 5 years of education, and my question is specifically to the doctors. What changes can be made probably to get the purpose back into medicine?
So it's the importance of the existence of that. That's why we talked about one solution is how the undergraduate and postgraduate students are being molded in the art of medicine. It's not really a science, it's actually an art. So this is again to do with the teachers. Like curriculum, there's not much you can do. But the faculty, if you really focus as an institution, who are your faculty, how are you training your faculty, and do you have an alumni, what is the kind of reputation your alumni has? So there has to be a lot of institution-based soul searching, which will really pay a big difference into that. But we need to, I agree with you that I guess the thought leaders in the country, in the field need to come together and have some kind of a national guidelines on teacher training in the field of medicine.
I have a very simple question and it comes out of what Ratan mentioned about the time given by the patient and the doctor's interaction. You said that it's something like 43 seconds before the intervention happens from the doctor's side. Do you feel as a panel that if this time can be extended, there would be bringing back the soul into the entire medicine business?
That's a very tough question. Because one of the things we're constantly trying to overcome is delays. Because we think if we see a mother for the first time, it should take us a minimum of 20 minutes, minimum of getting our history. And if she's had a problem in her history, then you may end up talking to her for 45 minutes. So we struggle to meet the number of appointments and yet not cause a delay. So where does one extend that time? If you're running an outpatient clinic for 8 hours and you may see 60 mothers, but after that you're not able to think. So I'm not sure extending time is as important as connecting with that mother by asking the right questions and realizing that you've answered quite a bit of her doubts. Also, if you're working in a team, then the team becomes part of the connection. So while the consultant may spend 5 minutes, there's already a connection made 15 minutes before that. Again, I have to come back to the LV Prasad model. I've been going there for years. I get to see the consultant who may spend 10 minutes with me, but I've already connected 20 minutes with the youngster who's come, who's asked me, who's looked at my record, and I've finished it in that time.
Thanks so much. So I think there are creative solutions to address this problem. One last question, please, because we're running out of time. One last question. I'm sorry, but we will have the panelists with us during the refreshment of things. I'm sorry, but
I'm Satya Ayagari from the Hindu newspaper. Perhaps the only media question for you. This is in response to Mr. Dr. Subramaniam's question. Why is always the doctors being bashed up and the bad news being played up? I beg to differ, because a lot of times we are also playing up good news. heartbreaking surgeries, heartbreaking treatments being done in good hospitals, we are displaying it. So more patients know that such things do happen. And we're also talking about organ transplants, how green channels are being provided for when people's lives are being saved. You don't forget that either. It's both good and bad, you know. We are also playing a positive role. I'm not here to defend, but I'm also stating the fact.
Completely agree.
And my question in a personal capacity is medical education question. Education is a state subject. And when privatization of medical education has happened, people are spending crores to buy a seat in the name of a convener quota or a management quota. What we do? It's like the computer language, garbage in, garbage out. Simple as that. You pay a crore or 2 crores of rupees and get a medical doctor. What kind of doctor you get another pay? That's not.
Which seems, I think, somewhere there is an agreement that in the entire, if I may use the word mess, quality and within quotes quantity of medical education has a hugely important role to play.
Well, I'm sure.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And
I'm sure that this was a very involved discussion. And now we're heading towards the end of the event. So I would like to request Mr. Javdeep Singh, Managing Director at SDS Hospitals, Ludhiana, to hand over a token of appreciation to Ms. Amira Shah. I'm sorry. Then I would request you to please hand over the token to Mr. Bhavdeep Singh.
so could somebody accept on behalf of Amira Shah? Maybe somebody was invested in Metropolis or other. Okay. Let me do it on behalf of her, we'll get it sent to her. I'm not interested. Come.
Thank you, sir. May I please call upon stage Dr. G.N. Rao, founder of L. Prasad Eye Institute, to hand over the token to Dr. Chandi Abraham. Thank you, Dr. Chandi. I request Dr. G.N. Rao to please hand over the token of appreciation to Ms. Lara Vizera. Thank you, Dr. G.N. Rao. Thank you, Ms. Lara. I now request Ms. Anu Acharya, CEO of Map My Genome, to please come up on stage and give away the token of appreciation to Dr. Harish Pillai. Dr. Harish, I would request Ms. Anu Acharya to hand over the token of appreciation to Dr. Erika Fernandez. Thank you, Ms. Anu Acharya. Thank you, Dr. Erika. I would also take this as an opportunity to thank all the panelists today with us. Thank you so much for making it so interesting and addressing a big concern today. Please be seated. Before we actually break for refreshments, I would for once want to call upon the entire team of Medium Healthcare Consulting on stage, please.